If you're a parent of a struggling reader, you've probably spent a lot of time focused on reading. But what about the other piece of the puzzle? Spelling. Spelling, you might say. In a world where spell check and autocorrect exists, does it even matter? Well, stay tuned because today we're going to challenge that idea. We'll explore why spelling is actually a powerful way to build a stronger reader. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Young, OG tutor extraordinaire, founder of theliteracykeys.com, and most importantly, mom of a dyslexic daughter. Welcome to my podcast, where you'll discover ways to unlock your child's reading potential. I'll share tips, strategies, and war stories that have happened along the way, because everyone deserves to be able to read. So let's get started. Well, hello, everyone. So first, let's start with the obvious. How does learning to spell actually help a child read the word? The best way to think about spelling and reading is that they're interconnected. I like to think of it as a yin-yang relationship. Perhaps another analogy is that reading and spelling are two sides of the same coin. Reading is decoding. It's about seeing a written word, pulling it apart to change it into sounds. Spelling is encoding, and it's the opposite. It's about hearing a word, breaking it down into individual sounds, and then finding the letters that make those sounds. This act of encoding, or spelling, forces your child's brain to work in a different way than reading does. But as I said, the two are interrelated. Let's take, for example, when a child reads the word tray, they identify the individual sounds. T says t, R is digraph AY says A, blend it, the word is tray. But to spell tray, they need to reverse the process. Break apart the sounds of the word, recognize the position of the sound, because there are different rules based on where it is. Is it in the initial, the medial, or the final position of that word? For example, the thought process might go something like this. Tray, I want to spell the word tray. What is the initial sound? T. All right, that's the letter T. I can write the letter T. Middle sound, that's an R. And what about the final sound, A? Well, there are multiple possibilities, and that's where knowing that it's in a final position, it says A, right? So it's making the long sound, but it's probably digraph AY because it's in the final position. So to spell the word Tray, that's a lot of thinking that goes on in the brain. This intense sound-by-sound analysis is what actually builds a strong mental blueprint of the word. The process is called orthographic mapping, and it's the foundation of becoming a fluent reader. Orthographic mapping makes a word automatic, so you can retrieve it automatically. So basically, every time your child successfully spells a word, they are taking a mental picture of it, storing it in their brain for instant recognition later. Now, there are many, many more precise explanations that involve words like phonemes and graphemes and letterbox areas of the brain, but I'm not going to get into it. Suffice to remember, reading is decoding, you break it down. Spelling is encoding, you build it up. And they both work together to build automaticity, which is the automatic retrieval of a word from the brain. So when your child learns to spell, they are secretly becoming a better, faster, and more accurate reader. So it's really a shame that many schools have abandoned spelling and no longer teach the subject. The few that have kept it generally send home word lists to memorize. There's no rhyme or reason other than, well, these are the words for the grade. It kind of sounds like balanced literacy for spelling, And we know how effective that's been since 2/3 of our students can't read at grade level. But I digress. So back to spelling. Okay, you might be thinking, spelling and reading work together. Fine, it makes sense. But my child hates to spell. The weekly list from the school is a nightmare, and they just memorize it for the test. And then the next day, they've forgotten. And this is where the method behind the magic comes in on how you approach spelling, particularly for struggling readers, especially those with signs of dyslexia. These traditional memorize this list approach, it doesn't work. We need to explain the rules in a different way. And yes, there are rules. So if they're giving you spelling lists without rules, they're not doing their job. The Orton-Gillingham approach is a way of teaching that's systematic, explicit, and multisensory. What does that mean for spelling? Well, first, OG is structured and sequential, right? We don't just throw random words at a child. We start with the simplest, most predictable building blocks of our language and build up from there. It's like building a house. You pour the foundation before you put up the walls. This builds confidence because the child is never asked to spell something they haven't been taught the rules for. And it's kind of like riding a bike. You got training wheels, you start at the basics, you start with the simpler words until they build the confidence and keep going. You start with one syllable words before you start doing multisyllabic 3 and 4 syllable irregular words. Back to OG spelling. Second, it's multisensory. It means we engage more than just the eyes. We use hearing, touch, and motion to make the learning stick in the brain instead of just writing a word on paper. A child might see it, you look at the letters on a card, hear it, you say the sounds out loud, you say the word, and then you say the sounds out loud as they're writing it, feel it. You might skywrite using your entire arm so that you feel the motion with gross motor skills. By engaging multiple senses, you create more pathways in the brain for the information to be stored in long-term memory. And that's important because once it's in long-term memory, it can be retrieved when needed. Learning is an active experience. It's not passive. Best of all, children learn that English isn't just some random crazy language. It's a code that has rules and patterns. And once you give them the key, they learn to unlock it. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some irregular words in English, and there are plenty, but you start with the regular words. So before we finish, I'd like to tackle the biggest myth of all. Well, we live in the 21st century, and spell check and autocorrect make learning to spell obsolete. And while I say it's tempting, that thought is fundamentally flawed. First of all, spell check doesn't help with homophones. Those are the words that sound the same but are spelled differently. Spell check will never be able to tell your child whether to use their, T-H-E-I-R, their, T-H-E-R-E, or their, T-H-Y apostrophe R-E. And those are 3 very different words. Similarly, it won't know if they mean to use to, as in T-O, T-O-O, or T-W-O. So correctly using these words requires a true understanding of language and knowing which word to spell. It's more than just an algorithm. Secondly, spell check requires you to get close enough that spell check can figure it out. If your child wants to write a word phone but spells it F-O-N, spell check might not have a clue about the word they're trying to write. The technology can only help if the underlying phonological attempt is reasonably accurate. And I speak from experience. Let me share a story exactly along the lines of spell check and how it doesn't always work. So, when my daughter was in high school, she came home one day and declared that spell check can only take you so far. That day, she had been working with an IB, an International Baccalaureate teacher, by the way, who's also dyslexic. So you got two dyslexics using spell check to try to figure something out. They were trying to spell the word paradigm using spell check. And after multiple attempts, basically each one worse than the other, they had to finally go and ask someone. And to this day, my daughter laughs about how comical their efforts are. And she has to spell paradigm. She says paradigm, because that is a way for her to remember the letters that are in there. So let's recap. Number 1, spelling and reading are two sides of the same coin, and they work together. Number 2, a structured multisensory approach can make learning active and effective. And number 3, don't let spell check become a crutch. Remember, spell check doesn't allow the orthographic mapping that we talked about earlier to occur. It's like using a calculator for every single math problem. You might get the right answer, but you never actually learn how numbers work. And as parents, our goal isn't just about perfectly spelled emails. It really is about ensuring that our children develop the mental architecture that they need to read fluently and to write their thoughts clearly for the rest of their lives. So thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please leave a review. I do recognize it's a hassle, but it does help others find the podcast. And a stronger, thriving community helps all of us. So thank you. Until our next episode. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Literacy Keys podcast. Follow us on social media, and most importantly, tell a friend. See you next week.